Kirshni, thanks very much indeed. On the 27th of February, the Nelson Mandela Foundation made an application to the Equality Court in Johannesburg for an order declaring that gratuitous displays of the old South African flag of the apartheid era constitutes hate speech, unfair discrimination and harassment based on race. Now, the decision to launch this application comes after years of watching public displays of the old flag and hoping that such behaviour would stop. Well, in studio now is Verne Harris, who's the Director of the Archives and Dialogues at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome
Pleasure,
to you.
Peter.
All right, so you lodged this application yesterday. What infuriated you so much that you had to do this yesterday?
Well, it's been coming for a few years. I think it's become clear to us that what was called Madiba's Reconciliation Project is in deep trouble. And that has a lot to do with the deep transformation work that has not been done, the deep structures of power and privilege that haven't been shifted. But it also has to do with people getting away with behaviors that are completely unacceptable. And so on the use of the old flag, for us, it came to a head last year with Black Monday, where displays took place again. We entered into a public debate around that. We made public statements, but we feel it's time now to draw a line in the sand.
Do you think that this is something that should have been done years ago? I mean, almost immediately after 1994, that we know what it represented then, and it still represents now. Could we have tackled it much earlier?
Well, arguably, we tried to build what we call the post-apartheid on a generosity. And in retrospect, I think we were too generous. We could have acted far earlier.
All right. So what does gratuitous use mean?
Well, we're accepting the principle that the old flag is part of our history and that it is legitimate to display that flag publicly when it's in a museum, when it's part of an art installation and so on. But if it's being waved in ways that are offensive to people, that are not within a context that we understand to be about the past, then it's problematic.
Because we're now getting into this area of it's quite subjective when you decide someone carrying that flag is being offensive, or he could just be a fashion statement. How do you make the distinction? Is it because it's part of a march, or is it some guy just displaying it in front of his apartment outside his window? When does it become, I'm doing this purposely to offend, or I'm just expressing myself?
Well, like so much in our country, that becomes something for the courts to decide. And we've deliberately chosen not to push for the criminalisation route, because it becomes then a first step where we establish principles and then see what happens with those principles. So
what do you want the High Court to actually do then? I mean, the Equality Court.
Yeah, we're looking for a declaration that gratuitous public displays constitute hate speech.
All right, so that each time that this flag is seen, so let's say at a rugby match, somebody comes with this flag, then it will be up to the court to decide whether that incident was actually gratuitous or it was innocent, inverted commas.
Well, you know, it does two things. What it means is that there's a deterrence. People who display the flag understand then that there could be consequences for me. And then it's up for the Equality Court to decide in a particular instance if it's actionable.
Why don't we just criminalize it? I mean, the Germans have done it with the old swastikas and things like that.
Well, let's just say this is a first step.
Okay.
Criminalizing means you have to pass legislation. These things take a long time, and we feel it's important. There's new energy in our country. There are shifts taking place, and we're saying let's be part of that wave.
What do you think is the resistance for people who are carrying this flag still? What is it that they're not seeing, in your view?
Well, in my personal view, I think at the very least it's a failure to understand the inclusivity of our national flag. You know, every element of that old flag. I was in the Department of Arts and Culture when that process was underway. every element was included in one way or another in the new flag. So to hold on to that old symbol is to hold on to an exclusivity that is associated with a crime against humanity.
Right. Do you have any idea when the Equality Court will get back to you?
These things take time, but we're hoping it'll move quite quickly.
And are other people joining you with this cause? Have you got any kind of responses to your application yet?
Well, it was only yesterday.
Yeah.
We only went public today, so we haven't had any formal approaches, but we hope we will.
All right, Verne, unfortunately we've run out of time, but I'd like to follow up with this with you
Sure.
just to see where it goes, because I've got a feeling it's probably going to actually be one of those kinds of rulings that might set a precedent for other things and images such as that.
Hopefully.
But thanks very much for your time indeed.
Pleasure.